So I grew up in the church. I went to a covenant church when I was growing up, but didn't quite know what that meant. So just grew up in the church. I ended up going to a Christian school, kindergarten through 8th, and then went to public high school, and then went to Point Loma Nazarene University in college. And the whole time I was growing up, I had always heard that you're going to like live this Christian lifestyle, and so you're going to grow up and you're not going to date until you're ready to get married, and then you're going to find this Christian guy and you're going to get married and have babies and raise them in the church, and kind of this whole like package deal. So I never quite got into dating or being interested in boys because that's not what we were ready for yet. Like, you're concentrating on yourself and converting people to Christ and spreading the message. And so I never kind of got into it in high school, but it didn't seem like a problem in my friends group, who later all came out as gay. But when I went to Point Loma Nazarene, there was this whole thing about ring before spring, where you meet a guy in the fall, you get married in the, like, you get engaged in the spring, so you can get like married in the summer, and then you can move in together. And so the whole thing was, you're in this dating pool of educated Christian men, so you should find your partner. That's what my brother did, and so they got married right after graduation. But as I was going into this, I was like, but I don't like any of these boys or men, I guess. Like, I just don't see the appeal. Like, what are you seeing in these people? Realized over the course of that year that I was gay. I ended up kissing a female friend of mine just for fun and to take a picture. But that's when I saw the fireworks and I was like, oh, I'm a lesbian. Okay, this makes sense. So, but I couldn't come out because Point Loma had a lifestyle covenant that you couldn't be gay and attend that school, and my brother also went there. So I started taking some steps into it. I did Day of Silence and kind of started researching what the Bible says about homosexuality, realized that none of the 7 clobber passages were relevant to gay relationships today, and had very many arguments with people at Point Loma about it. But I couldn't come out because I was still kind of on this path, and I thought this is what you had to do. I went home for the summer and decided that I wanted to go to Pride for the first time, which I did. And then, so I was working at the Tullys at Bellevue Square. My parents decided that it was going to be a great day to walk from where they were living to Bellevue Square, which is like 6 miles in the middle of the summer, so that they could then get the car and go home. But when they got to the mall, I wasn't there because I was at Pride. So they went home, strip searched my room, found my journal, which was my coming out story, and that night they picked me up and had all my stuff in the trunk and asked me where I wanted to go because I couldn't come home. So it was an okay situation for me. I had a friend who needed a roommate at the time, so I moved in with her and was working at Bellevue Square Tullys, and missing the church that I had grown up in. I had gone to church every Sunday, but after my parents kicked me out, no one would talk to me. All the people that I babysat for wouldn't call me, and so I was a little aimless for a couple months, but was just really missing that sense of community, and was like, I wonder if there's other people like me who are gay and Christian and who would accept me and kind of be that second family to me, like I was missing. So I Googled Gay Church Seattle and found MCC, which I had heard about in all of my research because it's the gay church. So I enlisted a couple friends to come with me because I was kind of nervous. So it was November 2007, and we knew that it was up at the Temple de Hirsch Sinai. So we had to take like 3 buses from where I was living in Bellevue in order to get up there. It was pouring down rain, and we could not find the door to where MCC was meeting. So we ended up walking around the temple like 3 times, finally showed up, and are just soaked. Ended up we went into the Temple de Hirsch Sinai's lobby, thought that wasn't it, and then I saw Gil, who I was like, oh, here is a gay flamboyant man. Let me go over, and he's like, are you looking for MCC? And we're like, yeah. And he's like, oh, you're here, and gave us hugs, even though we were soaking wet, looking like wet dogs. So I showed up and just thought it was kind of amazing that all of these people were doing the same thing that I did in church, singing songs and hearing a message and being uplifted, but they were also gay. And during a community announcement time, they were telling us about different gay events that were going on. And I was like, this is great. So I kept coming back. For a while, I was living in Bellevue, so I had to take 3 buses to get there and 3 buses home, and it was a big thing, but it was definitely the highlight of my week. So at first, it was nice to kind of get all of the hugs. Then I was a little worried that it was kind of the superficial level of church that I had been kind of used to. Like, you go and it's, oh, hi, how are you? I'm good, how are you? Good, it's good to see you. Okay, bye. And so I was also dealing with all the trauma from being kicked out of my family and my community. My best friend at the time was diagnosed with HIV, and I was told, well, that's what you get for hanging out with the gay community. So I was not in a good mental space. Started becoming a raver kid because I thought that they were colorful and fun and looked like they had like little families within the rave community, which I thought was really appealing. So I would go to a rave the night before, do a lot of drugs, go home, like bring the raver kids over to the house that I was living in. We would hang out for a little while, and then I would go to church, not having slept, probably in the same clothes I was wearing the night before, definitely a little strung out, thinking they were going to totally say, you shouldn't come to church like this, go take care of your life and then come back. And that was never what I heard. It was always, you came back, keep coming back. And then Gil made me another usher, and so if I ever missed a week, he'd be like, Lovey, where have you been? Like, I'm gonna come and find you at your house. Okay. So I kept coming back. I had a responsibility and a job there to bring all the stuff up and down the stairs. And so it was, and then I would meet these people coming into church who needed my help, which was something I think I really needed at that time to kind of be part of the community and bring things together. So I just kept showing up. Yeah, I remember just all of the things that we would do, like not insisting that people showed up wearing any sort of fancy clothes or formal clothes. I remember pastors going out onto the street talking to people. I remember hearing stories about how MCC had a bar ministry and how during the AIDS epidemic, there were so many churches who would refuse to serve communion to people who tested HIV positive because they didn't know if they could get infected, but MCC would still do it. And so we would still meet if there were bomb threats. Like, we would still meet pretty much no matter what. And I feel like there's a lot of trauma within the queer community because we've been rejected from families and churches. And so I think MCC is one of those safe places where people can come together, and no matter who they are, they still have a place here. Yeah, so I used to volunteer at Lambert House, which is a gay youth center, and I would lead this queer young females group. And one time we were talking about Pride, and I was like, what does Pride mean to you? And to me, Pride is kind of an Independence Day, because that's the day that I got kicked out. And so Pride's always been this celebration of me being able to live my authentic life and be who I am. But some of these girls were like, well, it's just a fun celebration, and it's cool because there's rainbows, and rainbows are great. But I'm like, you don't know the story of the queer community, and I think the story of the queer community is so beautiful. Like, it's these people who, now I don't have a problem being married or being out and open with my preschoolers. It used to be a huge issue, where if you got kicked out, you'd get your name in the newspaper, you'd get kicked off of your job, you would lose your family, you'd lose your place in the community. And while that happened to me, I was able to find other people. But I think it speaks to, we take care of each other. We're authentically who we are, we authentically show up to church, and we're loved and accepted for being who we are and then giving back to the world, which I don't think is a message that is heard enough in our culture. It's always be this, be this, be this other thing. Not, maybe it's be true to who you are, but it feels more authentic here, and like we're coming from a place of we've lived this experience, we've gone out, we've done the work, we've lost so many people during the AIDS crisis, yet we're still here. We've lost so many people because of trauma, or because people come here, hear the message, and then bring it back to their churches. So I really think we're a change maker there too. There's part of me that doesn't know if MCC is going to be exactly as it is today, 50 years from now, just from the change that I've seen within the past 15 years. I think that as queer people kind of come out more, and I definitely feel like there's a shift away from Christianity amongst the queer community because of how extreme it's gotten. It almost seems like to be in like evangelical Christianity, it has to look this way, and people reject so much of that when they come out that coming to MCC, it almost seems like a different spiritual experience. So I like how some of our members believe in paganism, Buddhism, like Christianity, different forms of Christianity. Some people are just here for the community. And so I think that there is definitely a space for us to be here, be centered in the love that we have for each other and for the world. People need community. They need in-person community. They need people who will support them, and hugs. And I think coming to church is really grounding for me, because it reminds me that you're small in the world, but you were still created perfectly as you are, and you have the ability to change your world and to change your environment and to continue spreading this message of community and love, which I think is very needed in the world. So I think that MCC will continue. I don't know if it's going to be as it is today, because it's not as it was 15 years ago. My thinking when I was a kid was much more black and white, and as I've continued along my journey of faith, it's gotten more rainbow. As I used to think there was one way up the mountain, and you had to go on that route, and it was the only way, and otherwise you were stuck in the valley of despair. But now I see that there's so many different paths up the mountain that people find for themselves or create for themselves. So I see more possibilities, but I'm glad that I'm on my path up the mountain. I think that the human connection and touch is really important. I think the sense of community that we bring is really important. I like that we share meals together. I like that we support each other in hard times. I like that you get to meet different kinds of people who come to church that I might not meet on a daily basis, because we're just here focusing on how to show up for ourselves, our community, and our world. So I like that sense of togetherness that church brings. Like, we are very small. I think MCC I've always kind of described us as the island of misfit toys, because I feel like it's a lot of people who maybe don't fit into mainstream Christianity because of all of our beliefs and our quirks. But I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that that's a beautiful thing, that we are able to have this space and kind of hold each other up and walk with each other. I also really like the ways that we show love to other groups. I know we've done a lot for the People's Harm Reduction Alliance, doing the Card of Kindness, helping to support them. And I think it's very similar to MCC, is where these people who access the People's Harm Reduction Alliance are hurt people who have been exiled from their communities, maybe aren't making their best choices, but are able to show up at a space and find community and find resources for being exactly who they are, and being loved exactly for who they are, no matter where they are on the journey. So I see a lot of similarities between us and them, because no matter where somebody is in the world, they still need love and acceptance. You're not going to change anybody by shaming them or ridiculing them or telling them you have to leave our group until you become X, Y, or Z. Like, God made you so perfectly the way that you are. So I think when we accept and get to love different types of people, we get to see different ways that God has created humanity. I missed coming to church in person during online space. I even think there's there's a lot of health aspects that come from religion that are like scientifically proven. When people are grateful for each other, that does a lot for bodily health. When people are singing together, it like accesses the like vagus nerve or something, which also helps when people are in a group taking collective breaths together, like we do during songs or during community prayer. That has an effect on us as humans. So when we were meeting during quarantine, it was the online service I thought was kind of sad because it was almost a reminder of what I was missing and how I was missing showing up and connecting with people. We did do women's group, and we started doing every week. We would go and check in with each other, which I thought was ridiculously helpful to me. Because at the time, when the quarantine started, I had just started kind of going on this mental health journey and starting therapy. I ended up becoming estranged from my family, but it was nice being able to show up and talk to people who understood and were part of my community and were supportive about it every week. And just being able to say the crazy things that my family had said and how I responded and get the resources. And so I think that that was really invaluable. I think MCC has always provided me with a lot of invaluable resources. I had a partner a couple years ago who's coming out as trans, and at the time there were like 3 other couples in the church who also had a part of the couple were coming out as trans, and so I was able to, here's all the feelings that I'm going through, that my partner's going through, how can we get together, how can we find resources, and just knowing that somebody else is going through the same thing is really helpful. Yeah, so I've always been a little jittery. I don't like to sit still. So at the beginning, I would come to church, and Gil and I would sit in the back and just snuggle the whole service at the Temple to Her Sinai because there was a bench. When we moved into the Methodist temple, I was in the back row, but Gil would sit out in the lobby, so we wouldn't snuggle anymore. So I would just take notes all the time. But then I was also up and down too. I would do community prayer, I would lead all the music, and so there's always different ways for me to get involved. So I could get up and be moving and not have that as a problem. Now I cross-stitch during church, which I saw that Ellie was doing, and I was like, oh, it is okay to do things with your hands during service. And so, yeah, just being around Ellie has helped me kind of find more things that make me comfortable. So I feel like I learn and grow a lot from people at church. They asked me to lead music because I'm loud, and so if I know what I'm singing, and we used to meet before and practice what we were singing, and so then sometimes nobody else would know the tune, but I'd just be in the front singing loudly, and so then everyone's able to kind of follow along.
That's really how it went for many years.
But I'm like, you just show up and you make a joyful noise. It's not like, who are we trying to impress? Nobody.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Just ourselves.
Right.
And yeah. But yeah, I miss getting up and looking around and seeing everybody's faces when we're doing, in the song Child of God, we're talking about how you're family. And that was really nice to be able to kind of look around and be like, you are family. Like, family is made up of people who love you and support you and show up for you, and that's what we do here at MCC. Even at my wedding, I got, my parents didn't want to walk me down the aisle, so I was walked down the aisle by 2 people from MCC. Gil, who has known me now for so long and has seen this evolution of me, and Michelle, who, her relationship with her previous partner, Carol, they had been together for 25 plus years. And so when I first came out, I was told gay people don't have long-term relationships. And I really wanted a long-term relationship. But then when I saw Michelle and Carol, I was like, oh, that was not true. Gay people can have these beautiful relationships. So, yeah. Michelle would show up. She showed up to my apartment one time when I was living, like one of my first apartments, which was this little place tucked up behind Freeway Park. No one in my family had been there. Like, I wasn't very proud of, like, living in this little, like, tiny apartment that I could barely afford. But Michelle would show up because she wanted to teach me how to serve communion. So just people showing up for me and, like, the responsibilities that people gave me was huge. I was making some really bad choices for myself, like when I was in my early 20s, like when I had first gotten kicked out. And like I was working at a coffee shop, and I want to say I would have found more community, but I wonder if I kept making poor like I got really lucky with some of the choices that I made where things were fine. Like I would go to raves that started at 2 in the morning in Soto and take the bus home afterwards, like while on drugs, and was totally fine. Like, so I wonder if I had kind of continued to go down that path, if I would even still be here. So I'm very glad that I found this place.
So I mean, the theme here is you have grown up in this church.
I really have.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
What a different trajectory from imagining a life where you started.
Absolutely. I think because when I was first coming, I wanted to be a teacher since I was in high school, and I had gone through I went through teaching academy, and I was interning in classrooms. But when I came out, I was told gay people need children need role models, not gay people with agendas. And so I thought I shouldn't be around kids because I'm not a good person to be around kids, and I never want to hurt a child's development. But it was at MCC, I saw people with kids who were doing a great job of raising their kids and having their own families. And so I would talk about it a little bit, and just everyone encouraged me, like, if you feel passionate about working with children, you should absolutely work with children. So it was a lot of the support that I was receiving here that made me want to go back to school. So now I'm almost done with my bachelor. I have one more year, and then I'll have my bachelor's degree in early childhood education. I think everyone at the moment is kind of dealing with the collective trauma of the pandemic. I think it's been hard. It's been hard to know what's safe to do and how to show up for people. I know I work with the tiny humans who until like now they're finally getting their second boosters, but I haven't been really wanting to do anything because I don't want to catch anything and bring it back to them and give them long COVID, or kill them, or cause their families to be traumatized. We had an outbreak in my classroom, and there was a boy who caught it, and he had a 4-day-old baby sister. So a 4-day-old baby had to have a COVID test, and their whole family, a week after this baby was born, had to be quarantined within their house so they're not spreading anything to her. And so I take this responsibility very seriously. So I've been very kind of locked down since the pandemic started. And now that we're seeing cases still rising, now that we're not having to mask mandatorily outside, I like that in MCC we're really taking care of the people who are here by continuing to mask, having to people be vaccinated. I do think that there's more that we can give, but I think it's also okay to say, like, maybe we're not quite as involved as we've been in the past, but it's not because of a moral failing or because we're dying or anything. It's just, I think we're dealing with a lot. An idea that I've been kind of toying with is I went to Lambert House, which is this gay youth center, when I was a teenager, and it was similar to MCC in the vibes, where it's like just keep showing up, like even if you're smelly or hungry, and we'll give you resources. And so one of the things that they do is feed you dinner at Lambert House, and so I've kind of like maybe we could do that as like an MCC once a month, make dinner or something for the kids at Lambert House, and then just if you were raised in a crazy church who had very terrible rules and told you terrible things about yourself, you don't have to believe that. There's a different way that you could believe.
Which we know is a significant percentage of the people who seek out places like Lambert House.
Right.
It's back to your story, right back to your story.
Yeah, with the 40% of homeless youth are LGBTQ. Yeah, I think there's definitely this common bond that gay people share. I think that's one of the reasons I like being in a queer church, is because I feel like we all kind of have this similar background of having to really find out who we are really struggle to find out who we are authentically, and then trying our best to live that life, even when other people or organizations are telling us that we're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did start the women's group, yeah. I had been reading the book Gay Seattle, and it had been talking about how in the U District so many of these women's groups had sprung up to talk about feminism, and I was like, we should do that with MCC. So I don't know how long it's been going on now, a couple of years. When I grew up, I always heard you have to be equally yoked, and so if your partner isn't Christian, it's not going to work, because then they're the opposite of a Christian, and they're worshiping the devil, and they're just trying to bring you down, and all of these harmful messaging. It doesn't actually have to be like that. Ashley, my partner, my wife, was raised in the South and had very, I guess, horrible messaging about Christianity, which is fair. Also, they do not sit still well, and so they're very fidgety and, yeah, likes to sleep in. And so when we first started dating, we went on a date, and I was like, I'm Christian, I go to MCC, and her roommate had to talk her into going on a second date with me, like, but maybe she's not crazy Christian like you grew up with. And so Ashley went on a second date with me, and now we met in January of 2016, and we got married in June of 2018. So now, like, what's the math? 6 years, 6.5 years? So she's come to church with me a handful of times. But it's, yeah, I don't think she needs to necessarily be with me. Like, we don't have, like, she's definitely very supportive of me going, as she's supportive in everything I do. So, and I also want to be supportive of her and her walk. And so if this isn't something that feeds her, don't do it. It is something that feeds me, so I'm going to do it. But like I said, there's many paths up the mountain, and we definitely talk about things that happen at church, and she comes to women's groups sometimes, and so I think that you can definitely be partnered with somebody who doesn't come to church. There was a woman who goes to our church who was trying to come out to her kids, and so I got to meet up with her and kind of talk about what her fears were, and then see how she was going to do it. And then she came out to her kids, and then we got to meet up again, talk about how it went, and her kids were accepting. And so it's just been nice to kind of be part of people's journeys. And I think that I think the impact that we made as a church will never be truly known, because we make so many differences with people, maybe people who just come here once, but then question what their church has been telling them, or maybe then start to question why at their church and create change at their churches. So I think that we've had a bigger impact than we've realized. I think MCC is family, MCC is community, MCC is people being authentically who they are, and MCC is wanting to give back the love to the world.